Hi, this is Kate Baker, and I want to share with you today an experience I had as an Edmodo Certified Trainer. Once you have completed the cohort and you've earned your badge as an ECT, you're probably wondering, how do you get to go train people? Well, you could go solicit for trainings yourself and make contact with people, but also Edmodo can do some of the work and get you connected to folks who need to be trained. So always check the Teacher Leader Hub. Once you're in ECT, you may see training opportunities appear as a challenge in the Teacher Leader Hub. If you fill out the form and you meet the requirements of the session, you may get asked to actually be able to present. So for this particular session, I was asked by Claire to present on going paperless with Edmodo. This is part of Edmodo's 1-hour mini training series. Most likely, you will not be doing full-day workshops on getting folks acclimated to Edmodo. You're probably going to end up doing 1-hour conference sessions or 1-hour after-school sessions with your staff members. So my advice to you is that when you're trying to craft an agenda or you're trying to think about how to train people in Edmodo, don't try to do all the things. Just focus on very specific core features and have a very specific focus or theme for your training. So in the case of this one, Claire asked me to pick from the 6 different topics that they already have available, and I said, well, I want to do going paperless with Edmodo. Very easy for me to do. She sent me the training slides and the master copy, which I made a copy of and then put my own spin and visual design on it. So for this, I made sure to add in my own contact information, and I always make sure that I talk about my experience as a teacher and then any other relevant experience. And whenever I'm doing a training, I always, even if it's virtual, I wear my Edmodo ambassador or trainer shirts. I want to represent the company well. So for the case of this particular training, I didn't have to think of an agenda off the top of my head. I knew the topics that Edmodo wanted me to focus on. I know they wanted to focus on groups, polls, quizzes, and assignments. Again, all under this focus of going paperless. So I knew that the objective for this particular training session was that folks were going to be able to walk away with specific protocols for how they could use less paper in their own classroom. So I wanted to make sure that this was very hands-on, and I wanted to make sure that session participants functioned as students first. I didn't necessarily want to take them on a tour of all, again, the features of Edmodo, because that can be overwhelming. I wanted them to experience it. So for the first part of my session, this took about 5 minutes. I explained the different types of Edmodo groups, what you can use your groups for. I talked about how it makes me more efficient as a teacher, and then I made sure to add in my own classroom-specific information, as well as some pictures from my classroom. Now, just a word here about pictures of your students. You want to make sure that your faces of your students are not visible. So while yes, you can see there's various students here, I do a lot of the over the shoulder shots so I can catch the hardware in the picture and can see them working, but you can't really see the students themselves. Their identities are protected. Then rather than jumping into a group and showing them Edmodo live, what I'll do instead is grab some screenshots of the things I want to specifically highlight. So in the case of this particular one, I wanted to focus on the organization of small groups and how you can take a large classroom group and turn it into small ones. And I'm using examples from my own classroom. That's very powerful. You want to tell your own stories. You want to share information with them that you've experienced and is relevant to them. So I always make sure I tell specific stories, and those of you that are in my philosophy and impact discussion group have heard me talk about Ray, my student who was a C/D student who flew under the radar, and I always talk about him as the example of why I gamify my classroom unit with Edmodo. in the case of the Odyssey. And that's a really powerful story to share with your session participants, how you've used Edmodo to reach students. After about, a good 5-7 minutes of me doing the initial talking and going over everyone, the focus of the session, I then made sure to get them into the group. And so again, this takes a little bit of time ahead of time. My slides, it took me a few days to build this. And then the training group, it also took me a few days. Now I got another tip for you is this. When you name your training group, I usually start with the number and the dash, and I always include the word training in it so that it's easy keyword for me to locate it. And then this way, the other nice tidbit is that if I need to show them the progress area for that particular group, look at what happens. It appears first, which makes things so much easier. So once we're into the group, I always start with a welcome message and then my session agenda. I usually make a new group for each type of training. So in the case of this one, I will make a copy of this group and reuse it or have folks continue to join this group. I won't always make them from scratch. It just depends on the focus of the training group. So I include the agenda, some tasks, and then I, of course, always attach the copy of my slide deck and then the training evaluation form. So at the conclusion of your session, you want to make sure that your participants fill out this Edmodo training evaluation because that information goes back to Edmodo. And the better your trainings are, the more receptive people are to you as an ECT, the more trainings you're gonna get. So the rest of this group, I started off with a poll that I wanted them to answer, and this was a good icebreaker for me to get a read on how familiar they are with Edmodo. And then the second task, after I go over the poll with them, is I'll jump back to the training slides and I will go over, the important features and talk to them briefly about that. So the second task after the poll, if you notice, I've scaffolded this. I've started with an easy topic, an easy task poll, and then I'm moving up to quizzes, something a little bit more involved. And the quiz I'll again name it training quiz, and then I have it focused on Edmodo features. Now I'll tell the folks in the room that they have, this is 11 questions, they have 5 minutes to complete the quiz. And I always make sure the quiz is loaded with varying question types so that they can get a feel for the features. And I do ask them that even if they don't finish, to still hit the submit quiz, because then I can go into the grading area of it, and then I can talk to them about, okay, well, what happens when a student doesn't finish a quiz? What happens? Oh, look, we can see who has submitted it and who hasn't. And so I can give them real-time feedback as well as real-time instruction in the group that they are working with. Plus, this lets me know too, I can see what pieces they didn't quite understand, and then I know I need to go over the questions where a lot of folks struggled. So this helps to also target my own instruction with the group in that session. I don't want to waste time telling them things they may already know, but I need to give them tasks that will let me see what they do and do not know very quickly because our time is very precious. So after quizzes, I'll jump back into the slides and I'll talk to them about, what's the features of quizzes in this particular case. Again, I include on my slide deck some screenshots that are annotated with information. I make sure I block out my students' names to protect their privacy. And then I give them the opportunity to experience the next feature of Edmodo, which is assignments. Now, when you're building your training group and you're thinking about, well, what do you want them to do? You don't necessarily know what content area you need to focus on with your audience. But remember, Edmodo is not about the what. It is about the who and how you can use Edmodo to connect people. So for this training group, the last assignment I made for them, the last task, was a very quick task despite being probably the most involved work for them to do. So I made a document, and I didn't really worry about content. Instead, I made it in such a way that each person would get their own document, they could type on it, but this became an icebreaker type activity where they were able to find people they may not necessarily know in that training session. And remember, I'm not in the room with them. I'm giving them a task, I'm setting the time for how long they have to do it, and then I'm listening through the microphone as to what's going on in the classroom space. And it was really fascinating to listen to it because I could hear them saying, "Oh, you like to cook? Oh, what is it that you like to cook? Oh, you own a smartphone? Oh, I think everybody owns a smartphone." But if you notice, I didn't make it complicated. I wanted it very easy for them to find someone in their classroom that they could fill in the box for. And then if they get 3 in a row, hit submit, turn it in, and then I can talk to them about the grading of it. So if you notice, we have a repetition here. 3 core features, 3 simple tasks. And then I don't overload my group with too much information. I keep it all focused on this specific topic of going paperless with Edmodo. And then again, to finish up the session, I always make sure that they do the training evaluation. So I hope you found this video useful, this tour of the experience I had presenting to folks virtually. And I hope all of your sessions go as well when you're in ECT.